Hi everybody, welcome to Tidalwave Studio. My name is Patrick Damiani and today I would like to walk you a little bit through the vocal recording and mixing of Carach Angren's latest EP, The Cult of Kariba. Let's dive in. Let's first have a look at how we recorded the vocals. First, the setup. I have a recording room that is around 50 square meters, and what I usually do when recording vocals is I make the room a little bit smaller by using some standing absorbers, some mobile gobos to place around the singer so that the room is a little bit drier. The microphone used for this session was a Perlman TM1, which is a large diaphragm tube condenser. And it went straight into my Aurora Stinger 1073 style preamp with no extra processing, so no compression, no EQ, nothing. I generally record flat with a little bit of headroom so that we don't clip going into the computer, and I leave all processing for the later mixing stage. Let's listen to a little section of the song The Resurrection of Kariba, and then I show you what the raw vocal sounds like and what I did to them to make them sound the way they did. Okay, Serigor, the singer of Carach Angren, he's really a master of his craft. He has an incredible expression and a really great raspy voice, so you usually don't need to do a lot if the singer is really great. But nevertheless, what I wanted to do is take the raw, already great track and just bring it extremely to the front, make it as aggressive and dense and in your face as possible. Let's see what we did. So this is the raw track.
Just like flies drawn to the court, they've gathered all as they bring Cult Kariba.
Okay, as you can hear, there is already all the good stuff in the voice in the raw track. So there is the aggression, the power, and now we just need to hone that a little bit. Let's start by engaging the limiter that I have last in the chain. I do this just so that we have a little bit more volume when we're listening now. The first plugin in the chain I'm using is FabFilter's Pro Q4, which is basically a Swiss Army knife of EQs and kind of multi-band compression or on-the-spot frequency-dependent compression. And I use quite a bit of dynamic processing here.
Just like flies drawn to the court, they've gathered all as they bring Cult.
I used a couple different bands here to compress and dynamically EQ certain aspects of the voice individually. And what this does is it's calming down the voice. So sometimes lower notes, they are growling a little bit too much in the lows. Sometimes you have sharp parts in higher notes or on transients or on sibilants, for example. And this EQ is calming down everything. So basically EQing different parts of the frequency range and making everything much more steady than a regular compressor could do, or even than a static EQ could ever do. In the next stage, I used a regular classic compressor, an 1176 emulation, which is set to very fast attack and very fast release. Fast attack because it will catch quick transients quickly, and also T's and S's will be caught right away. If you set your attack a little bit too slow, sometimes quick transients, they slip through, and especially all the consonants, they risk of sounding pretty sharp because they slip through and the vowels will get compressed more, resulting in like spiky transients. That's why quick attack and quick release, because I really want to catch everything. If the release is too slow, then the compressor is still compressing while it should already be taming the next transients. And on top, quick release also gives us a lot of harmonic extra content. I also once made a video talking about basically the superpowers of a compressor. It does not just compress, but it's also often adding in harmonics. And I'm doing this also by having a really quick release, enriching the sound that we have.
of witchcraft in an underground hole. Just like flies drawn to the court, they've gathered all as they breathe.
So as you can see, I'm not really shy with compression. It's hitting minus 20 dB of gain reduction, and I don't care. I really go berserk when it comes to scream and aggressive vocals. They really need every little bit of grit and aggression that you can pull out of them. And using extreme compression like this also helps. And as you maybe could hear now, that it was really a good idea to place some gobos around the singer, because whatever room information you are having during recording will be amplified now, and you can already hear the room coming a little bit more to the front. And by placing gobos around the singer, we keep that space a little bit drier, and we don't get like a strange sounding roomy ambience that we don't want just by using compression. The next plugin I use here is Saturn 2 by FabFilter, and I really love this plugin also as a compressor. And as you can see, I did nothing to the low end. I most of the time use this even as a kind of low cut. I did a little bit to the highs, but I didn't want to get some distortion on the highs. I wanted to keep the S's and all the high-end information cleanish, and want to make more action in the main mid-range of the vocals. And if I look at this band, I pulled up this dynamics button, which basically is applying compression to this mid band. And the drive knob here, which is adding a little bit of tape saturation, emulation, is set to just 20%. So not a whole lot, but I'm using it mainly as another compression. And I very often tend to use Saturn 2 if I feel that I want to compress a signal but don't want to use the regular compressor. This just adds more character and more harmonic overtones into the signal, and I like the compactness that's coming out. I'm going to show you what this sounds like.
Of witchcraft in an underground hole. Just like flies drawn to the court, they've gathered all as they breathe.
So here also the voice is getting even denser and more in your face with this. Next plugin, we need a little bit of saturation. Wait, we already had saturation. Yeah, but we need more saturation. And it's not because I'm really missing something in the vocals, but I want more. How could less be more? More is more. So let's pull the vocals really up in your face and use more aggressive and density-making saturation. And Devil Lock Deluxe by the company Sound Toys is a great choice for this.
Of witchcraft in an underground hole, just like flies.
I said it pretty easy, so the mix knob is only at around, let's say, 20%, and crunch and crush, the two knobs here, they are also set only at 10%. So we just add a little bit of harmonic content just to make the sound denser, and a little bit of crunch, so a little bit of saturation, and overall just around 20% of mix.
Of witchcraft in an underground hole, just like flies drawn to the court, they've gathered all as they bring cold.
It's not a huge difference, but adding a little bit, and it's often like adding a little bit here, a little bit there, and it just all sums up to something really spicy in the end. Next up, and the final step before we hit the limiter, is a clipper. I don't do this very often, but in this case I wanted to do this. So it's just like shaving off a couple of dB on top that are exceeding a certain threshold, so that the limiter that's coming afterwards is not going to have to do so much work, and sometimes this just sounds nice. By the way, that also really sounds good on snare drums very often. Shave off 1 or 2 dB with a clipper before hitting a limiter, or even on a complete mix, shaving off like 1 dB max from the whole signal before hitting the limiter, and it often sounds more transparent than if the limiter has to do all the lifting by itself.
Of witchcraft in an underground hole, just like flies drawn to the court, they've gathered all as they bring cold.
Yeah, the clipper doesn't do a lot, but it's really like when you're fighting for getting a signal really loud and in your face, you're happy about every dB that you gain, and this way I gained a safe dB of loudness. And what I really like to do is, when I decided which plugin chain to use or whatever output gear I'm using, I print everything into a final track and go from there. So this is called commit in Pro Tools, and I kind of like this, like commit to what I've achieved up to a certain point and go on from there. First of all, to me it looks nicer to the eye if I don't have like a bazillion plugins to look at, and I kind of feel good about committing to a sound and moving on from there, not second guessing all the time what I did before. So let's deactivate this and hide it in the background, and here is our final take where you can see that it's been squashed nicely together, so the dynamic is reduced, the density is increased, and it's really in your face now. And because I was missing even a little bit more, I added a limiter to the end, and now you will be surprised by the amount of gain reduction that we are using, but it's what it is.
Just like flies drawn to the core, they've gathered all as they bring core.
Yeah, it's a lot, it's dirty and it's ugly, but it's exactly what we need here. Before we talk about the effects that I apply to the voice, so the reverbs, the delays and all that stuff, let's have a look at what we did for the backing vocals. Basically, I did the same processing on all the backing vocals, more or less. Maybe I tweaked one or two little things, but I like to do this, like I decide what I want to have for the lead voice, and then if you have like doubles or extra voices, most of the time I start by using exactly the same processing on the backing voices and then go from there. And backing vocals, what we did is, for example, here we have some doubles.
Right there, right then. Right there, right then. She gave birth.
And this kind of backing vocals is awesome just to accentuate certain parts of the lyrics. I know sometimes people talk about doubling the voice. What I always do is tripling the voice, because what do you want to achieve with these backing voices? You want the voice to open up big for certain parts, be that a chorus or certain words that you just want to put a little extra emphasis on. And what is the best way to get it big? Well, it is to get some spread and have voices that are coming from both sides and not just from the center. Because if you're just doubling the voice, where are you going to put them? Both in the center, you don't gain any size. Yeah, you gain some intensity, but it also sounds a little phasey and you don't gain any size. So what you want to do is triple the voice and put your double and triple hard pan left right, so the voice really opens up when you are applying your backing voices. Now I'm going to walk you through what I used effect-wise on the voices, and the same effects are also shared for all the other instruments. So I'm going to show you how I generally approach all this reverb and delay thing. If we're looking in my session here, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 13 different effect returns, so which means 13 different reverbs, delays, whatever. So what do we have here? I have a room for the guitars, I have an orchestra hall, a church hall, a shimmer, which is kind of a modulated bright reverb, a stereo delay, a quarter delay, a room. Bright, which means broad, is basically a doubler where you have a signal, whatever you feed in is tuned up on one side, tuned down on the other side. Something like this, which adds width if you apply this to a mono signal. Then I have some dotted eighth, where I see that I run it through Saturn, so spiced up dotted eighth delay, an eighth delay, an EMT 250, which is like a classic reverb, some Bricasti, which is sitting in the rack behind me. And the last here is not an effect, but it's a test tone that I used to run through my outboard equipment to see if left and right have the same volume. So now, what did we put on the voice? Let's see. I used all 10 send slots, so we have always a mixture of various different effects. I most of the time don't like to just use one reverb or one delay. I always like to use it like spices while cooking, like a little bit of everything, which gives you a big tasty blend that is not so obvious, like aha, one reverb, or you exactly hear it's that kind of reverb. I kind of like this wild mix which really adds size and richness to the sound. Let's listen to what all these individual effects do, and then we listen to what they do all together. So let me solo them all, and then we add them one by one and see what they do.
Just like flies drawn to the court.
First of all, the Bricasti a tiny bit.
Just like flies drawn to.
It is set to Studio A. I have my Bricasti set to Studio A 99% of the time, and it's just adding like a medium-sized room, which is good to detach a really dry signal from the speakers. It's just adding some ambience around and just, yeah, making it sound a little bit more natural in the room. The next is a little bit of EMT 250.
Just like flies drawn to the court.
Which is set to like 2 seconds, nothing spectacular, a little bit of pre-delay. Pre-delay is awesome in reverbs because the reverb is coming a little bit later than the dry original signal, which lets the original dry signal sit in front and the reverb coming after it. So you have your dry in-your-face voice and a big room opening behind the voice. If you would only use reverbs with 0 pre-delay, which I see often in home recordings or home recording mixes, that the reverb is just put on the track with 0 pre-delay, the voice just disappears in the distance, which is fine if that's what you want. But if you want the voice or whatever signal to stay in front and the reverb to open up in the back, then use some pre-delay and it will be detached from the dry signal. All right, next one is a little 8th delay.
Just like flies drawn to the court.
Just a little slapback echo, adding also some dimension to the voice. Then some dotted 8th, which have been spiced up a little bit by saturation.
Just like flies drawn to the court, they've gathered all as they bring cold.
So I've saturated this and I used quite a bit of this dotted 8th, as we can see. And what I often like to do is, or most of the time do, is remove the lows and the highs from echoes or delays that I use on instruments, just because I don't want them to be so splashy or muddying up the low end. And one of my all-time favorite echoes is Echo Boy, or most of the time I use Echo Boy Junior from Sound Toys. It really can emulate a ton of different echo flavors, and I use this all the time. And I have it set to 100% wet because I'm using it as send and return 99% of the time. So I don't put it directly on the track, but send my dry signal to a separate track where this plugin is set to 100% wet and just adding in this as a return. So I have the dry signal and all the reverbs and all the effects run in parallel, and I can put in as much as I want. And also the advantage of not using delays and reverbs on the track directly is that, for example, as I can see here from this dotted 8th delay that we were just listening to, I'm sending a tiny bit of that delay to the EMT 250 so that this reverb is also reverberated a little bit and not completely dry. You would not be able to do this if you would just stack like reverbs and delays on the actual vocal track. Okay, what's the next that we have? This bright, this broad making widener that I mentioned before. I'm using Doubler by Waves for this, so I deactivate the direct button, which would be like the same signal as I'm feeding into, but instead I'm only listening to left and right, which is slightly delayed, so you have like basically a little bit like double-tracked vocals, and they are tuned up and down a little bit. So left is tuned up 6 cent, right is tuned down 6 cent, and they are also a little bit delayed, so they get a little spread. And this is what it does. It's just making the voice a little bit larger
Round just like flies, drawn to the court, they've gathered all as they bring call.
So it's giving some width to this signal without reverberating it. The next, some wild stereo delay.
Round just like flies, drawn to the court, they've gathered all.
So this is like a almost random pattern, left-right, ping-pongy delay. And I see that I used split EQ before going into that delay. And what I did is I pulled down all the transient information because this is kind of a ping-pongy delay and I didn't want to have like TTTs and SSSs and all those sharp transients bouncing around in the stereo field, but more keep like the sustained notes in the delay while reducing the sharp transient information. That's exactly what I did. And also here on this stereo delay, I removed all the low end and all the high end. And sometimes I go in and do more EQ moves or different treatments on effect returns. Nobody says that you just need to take it the way it is. It's perfectly fine to go in and EQ on the way into the effect. Maybe if you don't want a reverb to be overly bright, just cut off some high end going into the reverb. Or if you don't want to do this and maybe just find out that your reverb, your delay, whatever, is a little bit too bright, a little bit too nasal, or whatever you want, you can go in and EQ it, saturate it, compress it, do whatever you want with it. And in this case, I removed some 160 Hertz, I removed some 1.8K, removed top end, removed low end, because that was just what I was after with this echo here.
Round just like flies, drawn to the court, they've gathered all as they bring call.
And I especially love delays almost more than reverbs. Why is that? Because the delay repetitions, if they are timed to the music, so not just random numbers, but like eighth or dotted eighth or quarter delay notes, these echoes, they somewhat hide behind, for example, drum hits or guitar strums or whatever, and you really get a sense of depth and size and really atmosphere around whatever signal you use, in this case the voice, but it's not such a cloudy, reverby tail, but it's more like, yeah, hidden atmospheric delays that are opening up a room behind the dry signal instead of just drowning the actual signal into reverb. So that's a huge deal, that you still keep your voice, for example, here up front and let the room open to the back. That's a big, big difference. The same thing as with the pre-delay. Adding pre-delay is a little bit like using reverb as an echo because it's coming after the dry signal and not at the same time. And this really helps to separate the dry signal from all the room information that is coming behind. And using delays and echoes as reverb is really a huge, huge tool when mixing because, yeah, you just get size without muddying your direct signal. Next, we have some shimmer, but I think I only use this in some parts. I automated the send of the shimmer. For example, in the beginning, I didn't use it, but in the end, we have some more atmospheric parts. Let's listen to what we have here. Yeah, here we had some whispering, and I wanted this to be really like spooky and in a special ambience, and I automated reverbs. So here we are using some shimmer. Let me put this in solo for a second so that you can hear what the shimmer is doing.
Shadows over Lamandam.
It's a very shimmery, the name is saying it, shimmery bright reverb. Next, we have a quarter delay that also seems to have only been used in some parts. This is something that I like to do sometimes. You call this like a delay throw. So your delay is not there all the time, but you just like throw it in from time to time, for example, to make an end seem longer, like in this case.
Shadows over Lamandam.
So here we have some repetitions going on because I just wanted this lam and dam, dam, dam to go on for another while. And the final send we have is going to a church reverb, so a really big space. And as I can see, I only used it on the ending of one word here. I wanted it to sustain longer in this only part. And this is something that I do all the time, like automating everything, and especially reverbs, delays and everything, so that you don't end up with a boring static mix, but there's always something moving. And especially using automation on reverbs and delays and all other kinds of effects is really bringing in some spice into a mix. So now we listen to before and after, completely dry, completely unprocessed, and then we add in the reverb and see the difference that it makes.
The church floor into a secret crib lit by 8,000 black candles, a sanctum of witchcraft and another church floor into a secret crib lit by 8,000 black candles, a sanctum. Another church floor into a secret crib lit by 8,000 black candles, a sanctum of witchcraft in an underground hole. Just like flies drawn to the core, they've gathered all as they bring cold.
And now if we listen to the voice in the context, it doesn't seem so wet, so reverberated as you may think when you look at like a half a dozen effects put on top. And this is exactly this pre-delay and delay thing that I'm using. So the voice stays here and the room is behind. By the way, what I see now here is this is not necessarily now vocal mix, but it helps the vocal stick through. What I did is I send out a send to an EQ that is sitting on the main guitars. And what this does is, as soon as the vocal is singing, the guitars are ducked in certain frequencies, making space for the voice. So the voice and the electric guitars, they share a lot of common ground, if you want. So the electric guitars, especially those highly distorted guitars, they really fill up the whole frequency spectrum. And the distorted, screamy voice here is kind of similar. It also fills up the whole frequency spectrum and they fight for the same place. And by ducking down the guitars a little bit whenever the voice is singing, this really helps the voice cut through, and the guitar is still there and you hear it, but the voice is more important than the guitar because the voice carries the message, it has the lyrics, so we want always to hear the voice clearly. And sometimes it's a good idea to use some, ducking away technique of some sorts on the guitars to just make space a little bit more for the vocals. So this was like the regular effect stuff that I have on the lead voice and on the backing vocals. But sometimes you have like a track that you want something special on it, and that's the only exception where sometimes I put like a reverb, delay or modulation or whatever plugin directly on the track. I have 2 or 3 examples in this song that I want to show you. So here, for example, we have some echoes that just needed their own kind of echo. And since all my send slots were already given away on the lead vocal track, I just copied it to a separate track and did some special treatment here. What do we have here? I don't use a lot of ping-pong echoes because they are so obvious and I don't want this bouncing around all the time, distracting from the lead voice. But here I felt like I wanted to emphasize these words a little bit in a special way, and I thought, why not add this ping-pong delay? And that's why I just added this echo boy with like a quarter note ping-pong delay right on this track that only contains these 2 syllables that are getting ping-ponged back for a little extra effect. Here I have a track that is called V Devil. What an original name I found here, but I wanted some demonic voice here, and this is already all committed together to one track, and we used some pitch shifting up and down just to give us some kind of demonic voice.
They came with torch and pitchfork, an accuser of deviltry. They made a watch.
So this was basically, I think it was one vocal track, but I wanted it to be big and evil and have some special flavor to it. So I used some upshifting, downshifting, broadening and whatever, just to give it like this special flavor.
They came with torch and pitchfork and the bruiser of deviltry. They made a watch her children hang by the neck of the old willow tree.
Yeah, I like to just use something special for some sections of a song because it's just giving more flavor and it's never boring. So all the time you have something new. If there is not a new instrument or whatever coming, go crazy with some effects and just add in some flavor in the mixing stage. Okay, now accept all this EQ, compression, effect thing. What I like to do sometimes is go in and clip gain certain parts or edit certain parts right on the track. For example, like here.
And light that speak and run me your...
Here, for example, the breathings were a little bit too loud. Obviously, compression is going to pull up all the soft stuff. Breathing is much softer than the actual singing, so it's bringing that up much too loud. So why not go in and reduce them manually after committing to the whole thing? And this is also one reason why I like to commit, because sometimes if you go in and clip gain, let's say a breathing on the raw track, and then there's all the compression and saturation coming after it, it's just neutralizing whatever clip gaining you are doing because it's pulling it up anyway. So if you have all the processing applied and you then go in and pull down a volume curve, then it's really actually doing something and not getting pulled back up by compression again. If I undo this,
and light that speak and run.
It's much too loud, this breathing. So it's much better like this.
Light that speak and...
It's just some manual work, going in and giving some love to the details. This is extremely important in my book. Going in and taking care of all the little details, not just like one broad stroke over everything and call it quits, but yeah, automating this, automating that, really paying attention to every little detail. And if there's something bothering you, just go in and fix it. Just don't leave it because it's nothing that you can do with one plugin on the general complete track. You can do stuff on the spot by automating or cutting, editing, whatever. Okay, now at the end I want to show you two fun little extra vocal performances, if you want to call them this way. The first is, in this song we have a wolf howl. This is actually the dog of Ardek Clemens, the keyboard player of Carach Angren, that he recorded at home, and it found its place in this song, which is really cool. And another little extra thing that we recorded was for the song Ik kom uit het graf, where Serigor was singing as if he was in a coffin and was thinking about what could we do to give the voice like this claustrophobic sound. And I thought, I have this huge diffuser in the recording room with deep wells, like narrow deep wells, like cavities in the diffuser, and I thought, why not mic that up and let him sing into that cavity and also knock on the side of the diffuser to give the impression of somebody being buried in a coffin and screaming from the inside. And this is what this looked like. Nee, laat me eruit! Laat me eruit! Nee! Nee! And this is what it sounds like in the final mix. Alright, I hope you enjoyed this little tour around recording and mixing these vocals. If you have any more questions, let me know in the comments below, and make sure to check out the upcoming guitar mixing and recording video also from this EP. And hope to see you in the next video. See you soon. Bye bye, take care.